Hey, it's me, Rob Ryan. I am back with this week's episode of Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And man, imagine if I could take you back in time as a listener and give you the opportunity to have a conversation with the original founding team at a company like Tesla, long before even Elon Musk came along. And in that conversation, you would be able to explore everything that Tesla would have the potential to become long-term. Imagine in that moment what it would be like to talk to those people as you talk about what is possible in the future. That is exactly the conversation that I got to have today with Frederick Akpoghene from JéGO Technologies in Lagos, Nigeria. And wow, let me tell you what an honor and what a high energy, positive, and aspirational conversation this was. Frederick is a unique combination of a young, aspirational, ambitious founder, creator, and entrepreneur who also has kind of a depth and breadth of life experience, both in Nigeria as well as across the United States here, that affords him a certain level of maturity and context and humble perspective. We shared an incredible exploration of his company, of his mission and vision. And frankly, again, it just struck me repeatedly how lucky I was to be sitting and having this conversation with this young man at this exact moment in his story and in our history, because I feel like it's this chance that I never got in life to have such a similar conversation with the people behind a company like Tesla, which in large measures is potentially what JéGO is building itself to become. So Frederick and I hope that you enjoy this conversation that we got to have as much as we did making it for you.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jer Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. As you may or may not remember, this is the show where I get to have weekly conversations with the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and industry today as we come together to try to leave this world a little bit better than we found it. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Frederick Akpoghene, founder and CEO of JéGO Technologies, someone I've been eager, honestly, to talk to for a few years. I was just teasing him off air as we got ready. Like, I think I've been stalking this relationship to have this conversation for a few years because I am so deeply curious about the work that he's doing. So let me tell you a little bit about him before we welcome him to the show. We're sitting down with a mind who doesn't just live in the future today, but he lives at the intersection of electricity, mobility, AI, and frankly, transcontinental imagination. He's connecting the African continent to the world and the world to the African continent via technology and entrepreneurial thinking. Through JéGO, Frederick isn't just building innovative products or companies, he's building the infrastructure for a better world. His mission is to unlock economic potential by simplifying access to clean energy and electric vehicles across Africa and underserved communities globally. Through JéGO's intelligent energy solutions and stations, modular PowerPods, and self-driving EVs, he's literally transforming how power is generated, distributed, and consumed, making energy more accessible, affordable, and autonomous. From an engineering start at age 16 to lighting up the NASDAQ tower to creating tech that fuels households, moves people, and powers community, Frederick is really rewriting what innovation looks like across Africa and beyond. He isn't just here today to talk technology, innovation, and creativity. He's really here to talk purpose, possibility, and the future that, frankly, he's already building. So I'm really excited to say, welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers, Frederick. It's great to share this conversation with you today, buddy.
Thank you very much, Rob. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be on here on your platform, Entrepreneurship Thinking. It's an honor. Thank you.
My pleasure. And we are, this is a first for the show. I've had the good pleasure to interview and connect with folks from all over the world, but this is actually the first for today from connecting. Literally, you're in Nigeria and I'm here in Los Angeles, so that's pretty exciting that we're about a world apart time zone wise. So it's evening time for you, and it's early morning time for me. But just to give some geographical context to folks. I'm really grateful. Again, this is going to be a fun conversation. We've got a lot of ground to cover because you are doing some incredible work with your teams across the globe, really, in Nigeria, but also, as we talked about before, you initially launched the early iterations of this here in Los Angeles, which is a great kind of connective story for the two of us. So we're going to get into all of that. But I got one kind of opening question first and foremost, like, why JéGO and why now?
Well, this is 2025 right now. So the journey started more in like 2021. So now autonomous vehicles are getting, the approvals, and it's crossing the chasm essentially. It's still in the early stages, but it's making this adoption across different markets, right? This whole excitement. Initially, there was a lot of resistance and self-driving cars, and especially when we launched in LA, that you could have seen and this was in 2023, the conversations around it there were different, perspectives, a lot of interest, a lot of curiosity and deployment questions, and also a lot of first timers.
Sure.
And, from my ethnic background, coming from Nigeria, as you can see, I'm in Nigeria at the moment, which we'll get to the reason why I'm here today. But, as an immigrant moving to America, where for a lot of the Americans who got to experience a JéGO pod for the first time, it was their first time encountering a self-driving vehicle.
Right. Yeah. Because
So
2023, I mean, that's still before like Waymo launched here in any kind of serious
in
way.
LA, yeah,
Yeah.
we were in
I
LA
mean,
before.
now they're everywhere in LA.
They're everywhere.
But 2020 and now, to your point, it's increasingly kind of just culturally widely accepted now, right? That they're everywhere and that you can take them, and frankly that they're safer. And so, like, to your point, right? But at your time, 2023, not only were you new, JéGO in the market, but the whole concept was new.
The whole concept was new. And at the time, interestingly enough, I wasn't even looking at the fact that Waymo wasn't in LA. But I remember the conversations from people in the California ecosystem, just around, obviously it was in the Bay, and it's all over the place in the Bay, right? And essentially, it's like being in an event or just like, starting anything, and you have to face um, what comes with that, whether it's infrastructure, capital, or team recruiting. So we were early, and we still are, especially for the focus market that we are focused on. And one of the reasons we started in America was because, again, I was physically present in America. But the why, going back to why JéGO, why now, was an event that took place here in Nigeria, actually about 15, 20 minutes from where we currently are at our office in Lagos. So my cousin died, really a family friend that we refer to as a cousin, and his father's an uncle, because he grew up, I've known him since he was in diapers.
Yeah. Family by choice, I love to call it.
Family by choice. Our fathers were in the same business industry. They worked together. We spent a lot of time. So there's like infinite memories of this person growing up. He also moved to America to study. He graduated from Hofstra University. So I was living in New York at the time. So we were very close. And when he graduated, he moved back home to, help with his father's business in construction and hotel business, et cetera. And also he was part of that migration of folks who are migrating from the Americas or the US back to Nigeria. There's initially, during my parents' time, there were a lot of Nigerians that would migrate out. I come from a family, again, why JéGO? There's a lot of context to that. And this is part of it, which is I come from a family of like multi-generational business folks who've done business internationally.
Okay.
Like my grandfather lived in India. My dad did business. My grandfather lived in India and did business in India in his early 20s. So we're talking about 1905.
Like a whole different world.
A whole different world. And I can't even fathom, what that is. I kind of
I mean,
live
imagining how hard it is today to do business in any place, let
in
alone
any
in
place.
multiple countries. But to imagine that 125 years ago with the way the world
The
was
way
then and the way the culture was then. So entrepreneurship clearly runs deep in your family's blood.
it does, and I learned that over time through my own journey out. Right? You start, your parents, they share questions or they share things with you. It's kind of like a book. You have to get to that chapter to uncover that. I guess that's the universe's way of doing things. You got to be aligned vibrationally for that information to receive it. Otherwise, it actually, it doesn't stay in your data set. It kind of gets lost, right? So you can't recall it, right? So my grandfather, then my father was in the UK, did business in the UK in his early 20s as well. And I migrated to America. So, and he has my father's family there. They're all over the world. Same with my mom in Europe, etc. So there's a culture of migrating out. I want to give that context where
Yeah.
you, in Nigeria, we say
Yep.
japa.
Okay.
Japa. So like it's a Yoruba word. So you go, but you don't come back. Essentially, you're
Okay.
leaving.
Okay.
So people like
Yeah.
myself and my cousin who go then come back, it's called japada.
Okay.
So it's
So
basically you went
same root word, but essentially kind of the return version of it.
exactly. So if you've ever heard of the word Sankofa, it's kind of popular. And so Sankofa is a Ghanaian word, like the return essentially. So it's for immigrants, it's usually difficult to make that return, typically, right? Because once you've spent a lot of time outside, you've become used to that system. That is life now. And a lot of your friends that you grew up with, especially if you left younger, they're not. So you have to make new sets of friends, or your friends they're scattered around. But in our case, so he moved back, and the tragic incident happened. Unfortunately, this was in 2018, and this was before I started JéGO. I was already in other ventures, and I was able to have exits from that. And one was just pivot in sense of business wise, and the other was an actual exit. So when the incident took place, it basically led to me, it was around the timeline I discovered my purpose in life, which is just to inspire people to reach for their highest purpose and, you know, um, contribute to mental liberation and economic empowerment. That's my purpose.
Sorry to interrupt. Like incredible story, both heartbreaking and also inspiring, right? So you lose your cousin, a family by choice, a friend for life, right? You lose your cousin in 2018. This pulls you back emotionally and literally back to Nigeria. So help us understand now you're back overcoming all those different
Mhm.
difficult details of kind of the return migration, right? And all that goes with that. But now you're back and you're a business guy, you're an entrepreneur, you're thinking like, I want to do something here, and this becomes the something.
Yeah. So essentially, we JéGO, again, the why part was centered around loss, but it then turned into, I believe, energy, no pun intended, but you can if needed, but energy never essentially, it can, but it basically transmutes. It in sense never, it's kind of infinite. It just transmutes and turns into a different form of energy, right? So I took what that came with energy wise internally, and I wanted to make sure no one else on the continent and beyond, especially on the continent, because of, there's a bit of, it's grown a lot and it's growing really fast. And you're talking about a population that, in sense of continent-wide, is comparable to China and markets like India. So there's a lot of, young workforce, which, you know, this loved one fell in that category, 23 years old. The average
Yeah.
age is about 18, 19.
And Nigeria alone, right? I was talking with a friend last week as I was excitedly preparing for this conversation with you. right?
Hmm.
Nigeria alone is already about 2/3 the size of the U.S. as I understand it. It's about 260 million people or
But
so.
yeah, about that. Yeah.
But projected, say, by like 2045, 2050, so in the lifetime I have left, to be like 400, maybe a little bit over 400
Yeah.
million. So it'll be 30% larger than the United States, for example. And
Yeah.
it's a younger population, as you said.
Younger.
So what you're saying is that's happening in Nigeria, but it's also happening in some of the other larger countries around the continent.
Around the continent and just also, around the world. People are losing loved ones to car accidents. Over
Yeah.
94% of car accidents are caused by human drivers, of course, right? And driving is about awareness. And humans, especially with the cell phones and the digital screens in your car, and then also other drivers, we have limited awareness. And that was where, and there was also, issues around the first responders. The first responders, their first response was they didn't have fuel. This was years ago. It's changed a lot, but it hasn't
Yeah.
changed that much in that aspect, which is part of the reasons why I mentioned that Japada earlier, which is those who go, they come back. What you do is when you go come back, I gave the context of my grandfather, my father. It's like these guys go to these places and then they come back with experiences to implement that leads to societal, community, and economic change in their own circle, their
Yeah.
responsibility, their own world, right? And
Almost
that,
like bringing back these experiences culturally, intellectually, economically, business wise, right? Bringing back these experiences and then almost helping like your home culture, your home society to just like leap forward a couple of leaps, right?
exactly.
That like you said in your opening statement, which was so beautiful, such a great metaphor, right? Like a book, right? You can't understand what's in chapter 12 until you've lived chapter 12. But
Right.
if I'm associating all this correctly, like if you go live somewhere else for a while and you get to chapter 12 in your journey, then you bring that back. Now all of a sudden you can help that home community to leap forward from chapter 7 to chapter 10 or 11 or 12.
Exactly. Exactly. And you've seen this in the fintech industry where the unbanked, like the M-Pesas, the, Florida Waves, et cetera, where they've been able to make remittance a bit more seamless for those who are they're able to bank with just text messages,
Yeah.
right? And this is amazing. And one of the things that we do when we came here, first off, ground foundation, Jego means purpose in Wolof language,
Okay.
the Senegalese language. I lived in Senegal before I moved to America. So I was there for a year. So I know a bit of Wolof language.
Picking something up from a chapter, right?
Exactly. So, and the dots always connect, right? Which is why if you see the dots on the Jego, there's two dots.
Yeah.
They're all, it's one dot going to the other, but the dots are actually connected. They're going to all these different things. So
all very intentional. I want to ask you something because I think it's tied to what you're talking about now. You say in a number of different places across the websites, across the social content, you use this phrase that I saw repeated throughout my research: freedom starts with power, right?
first,
And so I'm really curious. And again, it sounds like you're almost kind of describing that already, right? Like, what does that phrase mean to you that it gets used and repeated so often?
yeah. So that's actually the freedom part. Welcome to freedom. That's a team effort, to be honest. And that was from one of our product managers from Google. And she had come up with that. And this was tied to the different things we're already doing. And welcome to freedom resonated with our purpose, our products, and it says our what and our why.
Yeah.
As I mentioned in Wolof language, Jego means purpose. In Filipino, Jego means energy. Jego also means movement in Wolof. Big movement, not even just movement, like giant leaps.
What a perfect name, right?
Right. So giant, like basically my Senegalese friends describe it, they say like a camel step. Now, when you look at that in our ethos and our DNA, what we're intending to do is utilize renewable energy, clean energy infrastructure to create an economic step forward, right? And in Nigeria and in most countries, even in all the way to Oakland, one of the reasons for high crime rates in Oakland is because high energy costs, high transportation costs. Those are two fundamental things that every living thing needs daily. You can never escape it. Energy is whether it's water, food, oxygen, any type of energy, you need energy daily. Same thing with transportation. If you're going to get anything done, whether going to the pharmacy or going to work, going to wherever you need to go, travel, school, a date, you need to move from point A to point B. And that the amount of energy and the cost of that energy globally has 4 to 5x across different countries. I've seen this in different countries. The only place, like China, they plan strategically when it comes to modernizing their grid, the solar panels, different conversation. America is doing that, the solar farms in different strategic areas, the work on modernizing the grid. Now on the continent, where again, the incident with my family friend who's like cousin, with that incident happening here, there's a lot of foundational infrastructure work, right? As large as the Nigerian economy is, the largest on the continent or one of the largest, there's still a bit of energy gaps. The government has made steps to essentially, since entrepreneurship thinking, right? Go from a federal level of energy generation and control to a local level. It used to be a state and local. So you can, JéGO essentially is a new type of that. So think Tesla with their infrastructure. We're not comparing in any way. It's just what they've done with the DC charging infrastructure, supplementing or giving power back to the grid. I think some of them have solar panels and other forms of storage, BESS or ESS systems that generate and store and power the charging infrastructure. So, but with Tesla, it's a bit different because there's a grid, a properly functioning grid, though it puts pressure on the grid, but they're able to generate electricity from that grid. Here, the grid doesn't supply enough for the entire population. So there's already a culture of generators, but was fossil fuel generators.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
Fossil fuel generators. And that was being supplied from China primarily. And now China has moved away from that. So what has happened in the last 5 years? I'm giving context as to, in the last 5 years, there's been basically that, growth, 5x, 3 to 5x, more than 3x, so 5x on average of increasing your energy and transportation costs, but your income has not grown. So you're not free.
Okay. Right.
So when we say welcome to freedom, right now this building is powered by JéGO's energy systems. Right now, I'm up, right now, there's a JéGO EV. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to a meeting and I'm driving in that.
Yeah.
Right. And I have my little gift accessory that we give to, people when they buy things from us as a bonus. It's we call it our nano PowerPod.
Okay.
And
there you go.
This is powering the laptop, just charging the laptop right now. And that has flashlights. So we had to essentially, entrepreneurship thinking is about solving problems. So we came here, everyone wants the JéGO pod, right? They want the JéGO pod because of how it looks, obviously the utility, but it's the cost. We're talking about north of $200,000 to set that up. Even in America, that's high. Here, obviously, it's only for special projects like the Waymos, the Googles that have raised billions, and they're able to deploy that. But in sense of selling to entities, there isn't really anyone doing that at scale. To other entities. It's still controlled, right? So there's a high demand for self-driving, but the cost, when you talk, again, why? Because that goes back to your first question, why JéGO, why now? It was because of that incident. But when I got here, because I was, running it from America, we started with me running it from America, but wasn't as efficient. We still have our team in America, and then there's a team here, and there's a team in China. So when we got here, we all had to realize that, one, the cost was a roadblock. So what can we do to get the cost below 50,000? And even then, that's still high. What can we do to bring it down even below? There's buying power, but we're talking about a market that the main buying power rests with the 10%, right? 10% of 300 million or 260 million is about 26.
Sure.
It's still a large market. So you can still see the activity in Lagos. It's like New York.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Chisos Capital. Everyone knows that raising capital is hard. And frankly, finding the next pool of entrepreneurs to get access to as limited investors is sometimes impossible too. Do you have a big idea, a dream you're building, but you're struggling to find early funding? Well, Chisos is changing the game for founders, creators, athletes, and investors. Whether you're launching a startup, growing your creative brand, or training for the big leagues, Chisos backs you. Chisos uniquely invests up to $100,000 in people, not just products, whether they be entrepreneurs, creators, or even athletes. With their unique CISA model, convertible income share agreements, founders get flexible funding without giving up equity or ownership, and investors get attractive returns and great upside with less risk. Chisos works for both investors and the people bringing our world to life. If you're seeking access to a truly diverse pool of deals, or you're someone who feels overlooked by the VC game, Chisos is ready to back you. So apply now at chisos.io. Just to underline something you've already said, and we'll make the point repeatedly, right? This isn't a cross-competitive, straight comparison to Tesla, but there are so many similarities just in the arc of the development of the business, right?
Correct.
I mean, most people, especially people in the US, forget or never knew, like, Tesla existed before Elon Musk ever got involved with it, right? So there's all that roadmap of just development, finding a place in a market, trying to figure out how to drive down costs, being early to the market, right? All those things that were true in the development of that company and the similar types of products and services that you are essentially have said, like, I'm bringing that level of experience and perspective to the Nigerian market, where we're also going to jump ahead a number of places it's funny, as I'm thinking of a story. So I'm old enough to have been around way back when my ex-wife, my daughter's mother, was from Mexico. We met in college, and this is like the late 1980s or the early 1990s. And I remember her saying to me, like, she had her parents in Mexico had a cell phone, right? And like 1990 in the US, like I didn't even know that many people that had cell phones, right? Like it was still kind of a luxury, kind of a high cost, kind of a technology limited type of thing. And the story that I later learned about, like, business and the economy in Mexico at the time, was that basically the government and a guy who was a middle-sized businessman who now is one of the richest people in the world, named Carlos Slim, kind of got together, and they were like, hey, you own basically like the biggest telephone network, and we want to ensure that Mexican citizens all have access to a landline, like, and they don't right now. And so how can we work together? And his response was basically like, honestly, it would be prohibitively expensive to try and outfit every Mexican household with a landline in 1980 or 1990. Why don't we just skip ahead a couple of generations of technology and let's sell cheap, accessible mobile phone technology to everybody, and we can afford to put in the mobile infrastructure to, connect signals and da-da-da-da-da. And all of a sudden, here was Mexico, which at the time was still a relatively developing country comparative to its North American neighbors, right? But it basically just skipped in one particular aspect of its systems and infrastructure and society. It just kind of leaped ahead. Yeah. Right. And you can make the other story I've always heard, like, right, South Korea, right, kind of did the similar thing with like broadband and the internet, right? I was in South Korea doing business in 2002, 2003, 2004, and they had better broadband Wi-Fi than we have today. Right. And you're like, what, like, how does that, right? Because they skipped ahead. They made a commitment. So what you're explaining to us is, it's happened before. You're not alone in the sense that there's foundational examples that have set the path for you, but you are a trailblazer. You and your team are trailblazers in bringing this to Nigeria and then the wider continent, and battling with these same decisions. It's fascinating. And again, like, for those that don't know, this is a great this conversation is a great opportunity to get educated, right? Like, Africa's a continent. Africa's a continent of I think about 50 countries. Is that right? Right? Roughly.
50-ish,
right? So so like just as distinctive as we have in the United States or Europe has in Europe with different small countries or different states here in the US, like, and the African continent is a vastly unique place. It is, when you add it all up together, the size that Frederick has already said to us. But each individual country has its own politics, its own history, its own limitations, its own cultures, literally its own cultures, like to the point of some of the neighboring countries don't like each other, et cetera, just like most of the world, right? So in Nigeria alone, you're making progress, but you see the whole of Africa as potential market. So help us understand kind of what is it what is it that you're seeing as far as this opportunity? And then what is it that the rest of the world just misses or doesn't understand?
The size of the market, the size of the opportunity. Yeah. You mentioned something earlier about the leapfrogging. I think we kind of touched on that. And that's kind of what entrepreneurship has been. If you look at Blockbuster, Netflix, where certain people, their first time watching a movie is on Netflix and not Blockbuster, right? Especially on the continent. Here, majority of the people's first time maybe watching an American movie was on Netflix and not Blockbuster. Or if you get the point I'm driving at. So same thing with bank. You talk about banking. There are a lot of people who've never walked into a bank, but they have a bank account with text messaging built on platforms like M-Pesa and Momo, which is by MTN. So same thing you just mentioned about the Modular, the cell phones. That's same thing. It's similar situation happened here. I think the mobile penetration rate in Nigeria is about 90. This was a couple years ago. It was about, at that time, it was 94% or thereabout. We're talking about virtually almost everybody has a cell phone.
So you and Jego have just leaped into that similar space,
right?
But from a mobility, energy perspective, right? That's
and I'll give you
incredible.
For example, we have our modular energy systems. Part of how we came up with modular energy systems was our journey in the US, asking questions with our manufacturing partners or technology collaborative partners. How are we solving for energy? And not till today, it's been addressed. But at the time, and we're talking about conversations in the Bay, in the Valley, where it's a big question mark, even in LA, right? It's like, how are we going to make sure if I am stuck on the highway? Now there are new companies and different, Spark Charge that are going to space, but it's still not even widely solved yet.
Yep.
Those same modular energy systems, early on in our journey, we figured that we need a lot of capital to get to driverless. And the truth is, for a person like myself, there hasn't been a person that looked like me at least that I know of, that founded, not hired as a CEO. I believe Zooks, the CEO, was hired. Same thing with Waymo. So the journey of, showing, first of all, going through that path of the unknown, right, has shaped what we've turned into today, which is a new type of disco, in the sense of when we meet with state governments, for example, or disco like a energy distribution company. So, or even if you want to say disco, it's, dancing is a form of energy. But how we're doing that is the same electric vehicle charging technology that we're going to use for just electric vehicle chargers. It has batteries, it has inverters. We can use that to power houses, businesses. So we started with a 3.3 kilowatt system when we came into 3.6 kilowatt system when we came into Nigeria. And we sold out, right? There were certain things we ran into, policies, adjustment. I was running it from the US. So we sold out. And we started with energy, just like I mentioned, the Tesla Foundation. I actually worked for Tesla Solar in my early 20s. So nice. I thought Tesla selling solar panels, the power walls, before they scaled up EVs.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, back when it was, right, it was was Solar X or something, right?
Yeah, it was Solar City.
Solar City, sorry.
I think it was his brother. I think his brother owned it or something. I can't remember.
Something like that, yeah.
But they bought it. So they had a wide presence of solar panels, and basically they became some type of utility company. Over 51% of their revenues from that. So, but in America, you don't get to see the impact of that, right?
Right.
Here, you see the impact of that immediately. You're not spending
Yeah,
money.
no, it's
You,
here it's still in many ways, although I think we're close to that tipping
we're
point,
getting there. We're
right?
getting
But
with the AI part.
in many ways, it's still kind of a nice to have,
It's
right?
nice.
What you're saying is literally like the people that bought your initial 3.6 sized products were, it was transforming like
With
their energy consumption, or their neighborhood, or the municipality. Like it was changing the way that power was stabilized in that area, which is transformational.
Yeah, I mean, they basically created new sources of income with the product. Money
Yeah.
was flowing back into their households, businesses as well, small businesses. And we had a couple clients that traveled interstate with the system. So they would go, one of them was an agro farmer. So they took the system from their home. They had some in their farms. And when they needed to go to another state that they lived in as well, they took the system to that state. So they didn't need to set up a new system. So that's what we came into the market
Right.
with. Modular energy, freedom, essentially. You're not restricted. Wherever you go with JéGO,
Now we know where that phrase comes from. Yes.
right. And then what we also then did was, because we have a plan, which was you can't sell electric vehicles to people that have a shortage of electricity, right? So how do we create energy stability, energy independence, modular energy? When we sat with state government, federal government members, and governors, all that, the conversation has been, and they quickly understood the value of what we call JéGO X stations. JéGO X stations are our stations that not just only provide charging, because you need energy to provide charging. So energy first, but energy distribution. So you can come with your 5 kilowatt system, and your 10 kilowatt system, or your 1 kilowatt system, whatever it is you need to charge, you charge it and you go back home. You don't need to spend money on solar panels, or you can rent an EV from that station, or you can get your EV service. You can buy an EV, you can buy a product. So it's our experience center. So beyond just being retail, it's a mini grid. It's a new type of mini grid that also works as transportation. So again, for a lot of people, their first cars will end up being an electric vehicle. We're hoping it'll be a JéGO,
Right.
or we're working towards it being a JéGO, right? You're talking about a population of 260 million, high demand for transportation, daily transportation, work. Lagos is like New York, round the clock, but high cost of transportation. Income has not 5x, but transportation and energy costs 5x in Nigeria and Africa.
But history tells us, right? We know, we don't have to be super smart economists to know, like that the curve is up and to the right. I mean, like this is where it goes as the infrastructure is developed in any country, right? As the infrastructure is developed and modernized, the opportunities grows. The opportunities grow, the education grows. As the education grows, then the young workforce then the compensation goes up. And now, I mean, so it's it's the
domino effect.
It's the yeah. I mean, 2025, and I'm 57 years old, right? So I was born in 1968, and if you were to literally sit down and like in detail map out the economic / social cultural mobility chart of the United States from 1968 to 2025, like people in 2025 would have a hard time realizing like what the US was, like what my dad's average annual salary was in 1972. Right. Like it was still like our per capita income per person in the early 70s was still like under $10,000 a year. Right. Which then all of a sudden, if you've traveled outside or lived outside the US like you have, or traveled like I have, like you start to see like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, that's what the average annual GDP income or per capita is currently in this country or in this country. Like, I mean, some of it is just demographics, history, economics, and growth, right? Like, so, but what's so impressive to me, not to sound like I'm fanboying here over you, but like what's so impressive to me is essentially you guys first of all, you had to find a way, like you had to find a way to commercialize something, right?
Yeah, so
that you could have a product that you could sell, that you could generate revenue, so you could proof it to your investor partner, so you could say like, come with us on this journey while we build the something else's that are the real opportunities. And I mean, the story that you're relaying about like local governments and state governments, I mean, they must be sitting there thinking to themselves when they meet you, first of all, they must think it's crazy and unbelievable. But then once they see it and they understand it, they must be thinking to themselves, like, this is awesome. These JéGO guys are basically going to build our electricity infrastructure for us, right? And then we're going to have to contract with them. And then the benefit for JéGO is once they've built out the electrical infrastructure for all of us, like then they can plug their different products into it. And now they've got their market opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like you said it. They see it as a way to not have power interruption. Because with the modular energy systems, just like you mentioned earlier with the cell phones, you don't have to run cables. Cables are expensive. So you have to run cable from a mini grid, right, to each house. That's expensive and also inefficient because someone can cut it. The mini grid can cut it for this community because someone was tapping power, or someone can cut the cable and steal it, right? Or just weather or whatever damage, right, from just being outside. So what we're doing is essentially if you want to buy an EV, you have that peace of mind that you have access to power with JéGO. So we first of all solve the fire on your head. Energy in the US is not a fire on the head situation. Not yet. It's becoming that with the the grid instability in certain areas like California, New York, Houston,
Texas. Yeah.
Actually, I've seen blackouts in New York during Hurricane Sandy. So this was years ago. So where it is right now is the market here is actually larger, just like you asked earlier. What are people not seeing? It's larger than people realize. It's an ecosystem. I would compare it to, because I spent time in the Bay, I would compare it to the Bay, and there's articles about this in, I would say maybe the 90s, like the dot-com era.
The beginning of my career. Yes.
Yeah. So like the dot-com era, but the difference is we actually have access to technologies that exist today. Like there are other EV companies here. The market is, people are figuring out their positioning. Our advantage is we're coming from markets that are advanced, like California. Right. You know, that we've seen what were some mistakes that were made in deployment. We're coming from China. What did China do right? What did California do wrong? California embraced EVs, but they didn't deploy the energy infrastructure ahead of schedule. So they
right now is a great friend here in LA, an alumnus of this podcast. Okay. Camille Terry is going to love this part of this episode.
I know Camille. Camille's a friend.
Camille said to me, Frederick, on an episode.
Charger Hill.
Yeah, she said to me, the quote that has stuck with me, and I'm hearing it today as I'm listening to you, is she said, like, Rob, fundamentally, we're in the electron business. Like, we're in the business of moving electrons. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, holy, I mean,
That's basically it.
And that's what you're doing. Like you're in the, Rob, before I can sell power walls, before we can sell modular power stations, before we can sell EVs, before we can sell self-driving EVs to public entities or to massive market mover type network companies, before we can do any of that, Rob, we have to be like Camille is in LA. We have to be in the electron moving business, and we have to stabilize the we have to create systems and tools and infrastructure that helps this Nigerian market and then other markets on the continent to stabilize that. So it's almost like here's the exciting part, right? Is I'm hearing right. You take those lessons from those chapters in the book you learned in California, but you're not beholden. You're not held back by the legacy infrastructure or the legacy utilities markets or the legacy ways in which electricity is sold or bought in the United States. Like, so you're free to almost kind of take the best lessons of like, oh man, if we didn't have to deal with utility regulators and public utility commissions and old infrastructure that people still want to help prop up because it serves their business model. Like if we could take the best lessons of the future and just skip to a market where they don't have any of that, but then we build it. Oof, right? Like opportunity meets timing meets history.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a timing thing, right? Because when you look at the different players, you know, there's policies around like local solar panel manufacturing, local power system installation and building things. Even same thing going down to EVs. There's a new bill that's been introduced I would say act first to make sure that EVs are manufactured locally. At least 30% of the EVs brought into Nigeria are manufactured locally. So right now in
Okay.
Nigeria, there's over 20,000 EVs. There's not enough charging infrastructure that can count on one hand how many public charging infrastructure is out there,
Yeah.
because it's a private sector play and the government hasn't come in with subsidies. So a lot of the infrastructure build out, our strategy has been selling to hotels. So we sell large, not just hotels, enterprises, factories, wherever they have a high energy demand, those guys become mini grids where others can come charge EVs. Because when we sell them this large energy infrastructure, we don't have to build it, right? And then our customers are in the network where they can have access to charging infrastructure. So they're different players.
As an old enterprise B2B sales guy from way back in my career, I could say I've always joked for years. I said the best way to build a consumer market business is to build a B2B enterprise business that funds your ability to expand into a consumer business later.
Exactly. Crossing the chasm.
Right. That's incredible. Let's do this. Let's give folks, because we have a lot of investors that listen. We have a lot of enterprise people that listen. We have government leaders that listen to our podcast. Let's do this. Let's do a little commercial, kind of summary commercial of JéGO for a second here. Right. So I think I mentioned your product list, but please, you'll do it better than me. So let's talk about what are the specific 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 products that are in the market right now, that we're selling right now. What is and this is the super simple business guy question, right? In the different products, what's the basic business model, kind of the proverbial, how do we make money, right? And then once we get past that little bit of the commercial, then we can talk about kind of the future, where you see it going now, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, et cetera, et cetera.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Shore Capital. In today's venture capital world, it's not just about cash. It's about relationships. Capital is harder to find, limited investors have fewer managers that they can trust, and the industry is just filled with far too much hype. Shore Capital is an early-stage venture fund investing in the world's most ruthlessly iterative founders, helping its limited partners to find founders who are solving the world's most dynamic problems, teams that excel in mastering the idea maze, teams moving with a rapid, iterative velocity and demonstrating radical resourcefulness. Shore Capital doesn't just write checks, though. They become fractional co-founders when needed, offering strategic support, high-leverage relationship development, and a deep commitment to the long-term success of their portfolio companies. If you are a ruthlessly iterative founder with a bold vision, or a limited investor seeking sustained access to the brightest big thinkers of our time, Shore Capital wants to meet you. So visit shorecapital.notion.site to learn more.
We really just have 2 core products. And those 2 core products are, one, we call our PowerPod. So the PowerPod comes in different capacity levels. When we got into the market, we started with 3.3 kilowatt system, but then there's 3.6 kilowatt system. I keep saying 3.3 because we have these. You
have some old 3.3 pilot versions?
No. We have these. We call these our PowerPod adapters. So these are accessories, essentially, and you plug this into your EV, and then you get power out. So V2L, V2. So, again, in the US, this would be nice to have.
Yeah.
But here, when you have an EV and you have this, it's your backup power for your house or your business.
Game changer.
Game changer. So you've seen the Tesla Cybertruck powering businesses in Houston during the power outage. So one, the PowerPod makes sure you have 24/7 uptime, peace of mind. Power goes out or high energy bills, you're not spending money on diesel fuel. My household, our office is powered by it. We have repeat customers that have done this over 5x. So again, as I mentioned, hotels are our core customers. Hotels, housing communities, factories, campuses, essentially. So campus environments, just simply put, campus environments where they need 24/7 or constant power supply. So we essentially make sure, one, our customers are saving billions of naira, which is equivalent to millions of dollars, right? Yeah. And that goes back into their business. So we're basically putting money back into the economy, because that now turns into buying power in different forms. So the investment, personal, and when I say millions of dollars, that's like per business.
Right.
Large.
Yeah. No, I mean, you can just, anybody who's listening to this show who has an entrepreneurial mind can think about the scale of how quickly this adds up for macro impact on the local Lagos or broader Nigerian economy.
Yeah. And so there's that, the power pod, access to power wherever you are, from so solar power, renewable energy. I need to emphasize that. This is renewable energy, solar power, but our systems are also hybrid. So they have the ability of, if you want to be off grid, or so if you have a charging station, or rather if you have a hotel, you can generate power from solar, store it in the batteries, the BESS. It's all in one. These systems are all in one. So it's plug and play. It's not separated systems. So that's another thing. Beautiful. So you're talking about the BMS inverter, and the compute all in one. And they also are powered by AI to improve when to turn off load balancing. And these are things we learned from the EV side, because every EV has a BMS battery inverter as well, and compute. So again, when we came here, we want to sell EVs, want to sell self-driving to the government, want to save lives. But then we realized this infrastructure, which we either stop or we saw it as an opportunity. Wait, we could use this to extend our path. Like, we don't have to wait on it. So the market's talking about 600 million plus people across the continent that are growing into power. There are more people moving into cities. We're talking about the energy demand grows. The universe is always and constantly expanding. It doesn't shrink. Your energy grows, or your energy demand grows. So we're meeting the demand for that growing energy, but instead of growing expensive energy, right, growing hopefully one day almost free energy. Kind of like how you can search and make phone calls and using apps for free. There was a time when that cost a ton, right? Exactly. So when energy is low cost or almost free, what would that do to an economy? You go to China, Ubers are a fraction of what we're spending in the US, because they have low cost energy. They have they have excess energy. They have to get rid of it. They have to discharge the energy from their systems, right? So it's the same thing in life. When you, as an adult or human, you have to ground. Use your feet, you walk outside and you ground, you let out your energy. So we in the energy business, which allows us to then sell our EVs, because in Nigeria, when you try to sell EVs, the question is going to be, where am I going to charge it? Right? Energy is expensive, or I don't have the bandwidth to add additional energy cost, because you're spending in your household. If you're an entrepreneur, you're spending money on energy in your household, your business, and then your car. And even if you don't own a car, you're spending for that inflated cost, right? Sure. So you're paying for it. So which I gave that example of Oakland, where I've been in my car in Oakland and witnessed the break-ins into cars. Like, you're familiar with the stories. Yeah. I would like to say that one of the reasons those things are happening is because, one, obviously inflation, high cost of transportation, and high cost of energy, whether it's in the form of fuel for your car or fuel or just your power, your utility. So because for those who are living check to check, that's a threat to their livelihood. That's a threat to their household. So you would push a person into desperation. So here in Nigeria, the difference is America is basically up here. It's peak in sense of charts, right? It's like ATH, all-time highs. Right? And by the way, my decision to get into JéGO as well was data influence from the stock market. Obviously, there's personal, but heavily data.
No, you can hear it. I mean, in the discourse that we've had, right? So much of it, well, yes, inspired by tragic very personal story, right? That moved you to literally kind of change course on
Change
what you
course.
thought what you thought you were going to do with your life as this outflowing immigrant, right? To come home, to remigrate, to come back. Like that is hugely influential. It's the foundation. But everything we've talked about since that catalyst, right, has
Hmm.
been is driven, as I said before, and I was putting words in your mouth. I apologize for that. I'm just so excited by how obvious this is. It's just history. It's data. It's economics. It's migration. It's population growth. It's, I mean, like this is all this is not just Frederick was inspired by a personal tragedy and wanted to do something better in his homeland, like story. This is a Frederick was inspired by a tragedy that then realized that there was a massive opportunity to do better in his homeland. And that opportunity was because these systems failed. These systems were too archaic. This infrastructure wasn't there. This infrastructure wasn't there. The predominance of human drivers was like the default, and there was therefore like no. So you just saw, in a moment of tragedy, as I hear it, like you saw you dealt with the pain, but you also saw through it, again, entrepreneurial mind, entrepreneurial DNA because of your family's history, and you saw all the reasons that happened
Right.
to
I
your
saw
cousin.
all the reasons
Right.
it happened. What can I do to change it? I can't bring him back.
So that happens less often.
Exactly. That was it. It was, I had to
Yeah.
do something with this energy so that no one else, because the only way I was going to heal was to make sure I was working on solutions, and which now we sell these solutions. We
Yeah.
sometimes don't give them at lower, the point is it's strategic. We've given donations to schools to
Yeah.
power schools, and it's, we generate revenue, and our market, our business, our investors, can attest to this. We've grown in sense of revenue since we've been in this market because of, again, entrepreneurship is about problem solving, and that's the outcome. So we saw an
And
opportunity
the
to improve.
and the fascinating part about it, again, it's almost like a stack of Lego blocks built upon each other, right? Is while you are commercializing, which again, first job of the entrepreneur, you're commercializing some level of those basic Lego blocks. But then each time you do that, and even when you say we donate some power pod technologies to a school, like, okay, you've now electrified, as Camille would say, you've now electrified that neighborhood in a way that neighborhood wasn't electrified before, and that eventually is at some point on a calendar of time that's going to open up
Yeah.
another opportunity for another product for you to bring in, for another, because it's going to help. That electrification of that neighborhood is going to grow that economy. I mean, man, in so many ways, we made a reference to like the 1990s. I'm going to go even further back. In so many ways, I'm a bit of a history nerd, and in so many ways, I'm listening to this and I'm feeling like the arc of the development and the migration patterns and the growth and like the massive uptick growth of the US, say between like the 1880s and the 1920s, right? Like when we saw essentially modern day United States become foundationally built, right? And then everything after that was kind of built, like post World War II was the next tier of explosive growth.
Hmm.
But you're in many ways, you're playing in both kind of a modern version of that, but you're also still in some ways essentially kind of patterning after those massive bursts of initial development
Yeah.
that happened, 100, 125, 130 years ago. And they're just repeating. So this is all data driven.
It's
I mean,
all, of
none of this is speculative except for the entrepreneurial speculation that
course.
is required to dream bigger than anybody thinks is possible.
Exactly. Even like I was telling Camille, I told her the market, she was like, the market must be better than the US market. I said, I mean, it's great. It's growing. And that's what entrepreneurship, when you look, you want to be in markets where you can, the ceiling is like that high. So you can
Yeah.
continue to, your LTV, you can continue to improve, just like you're talking about earlier. We provide power to this hotel. The next lineup is the hotel has fleets of EVs or fleets of cars that need to be electrified. This has been our customer journey. They come in with the ecosystem for energy, or sometimes it might be the other way around, but predominantly it's energy first and EVs. But even in the EV aspect where they need EVs, they still need to have energy products to ensure that
Yeah.
this works well. They need
Yeah.
this, but this is this is the oxygen.
Yeah.
This is the
How,
freedom, essentially.
yeah, they're back to the freedom again, right? Freedom through power. I'm curious how you obviously have investors. You just mentioned them kind of casually, right? Like, and obviously you have needed investors to get to the point that you're at, and you will need many more investors to get to where you want to go, right? But how have investors met this story as it's unfolded? And I'm sure it's different today in 2025 because of your traction and your progress than it was 4 years ago, right?
Yes.
But like, maybe let's forget the skeptical part, because I'm sure everybody was skeptical and
I
nobody
heard
wanted to believe
everything.
it. Of course, right? So how
I,
are
I,
maybe,
don't, I don't, I'm not a public, I don't share
yeah,
much of what goes wrong. I keep shooting the
just
basketball.
good for you. So let's maybe today more optimistically, right? Like, how are investors meeting the JéGO story today? Right?
Yeah.
Like, what questions are they asking, or what are they skeptical of, or what are they excited about?
I mean, today, like the biggest thing is like, I guess initially there were gaps around just understanding what self-driving is, you know, and obviously I would say for a company our size, the technology, the cost that goes into doing that at the time was they probably, at the time I even had people say things like, this is a big boys game. It's expensive. I had billionaires telling me that. I was expecting, this is a big boys game. So they're intimidated for some reason. But it's a
So
big
like
boys.
when the billionaires are telling you, "Hey, this is a big boys game," like that, I might not even be able to play in this. You probably should just do something else, young man.
They're like, stick to the energy business, stick to the EV charging. I mean, whenever, and I almost listened, to be honest. And this was told to me when I was in the Bay, FYI.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
This was told to me when I was in the Bay. And then, some of those same investors are now like chasing the self-driving, Waymo, especially Waymo. So Waymo is doing very great in this space. They're a leader in this space. And, we're inspired by the work and how much public acceptance and traction that they have. So for us, we want to do that here, right? That's why I started JéGO, because this is where the incident took place. So even if I do it over there in the US, right, which is again going back to the investor part, I had to make that case. Like, there's a timeline, right, where you get into Nigeria, you're late. If we didn't get into Nigeria by 2023, get into the market today, we're like 20 companies in the EV and energy space behind.
Yeah,
So you would
right.
have to fight these 20 companies, not fight, but you have to go
Yeah,
against
yeah,
this resistance. So now they see it, right? And the challenge has been operations in Nigeria and how they navigate that. But obviously with what's going on economically in the US, there's investors from the US that want to now invest outside the
right,
US. So
right.
I have seen that shift. I've had my heads down, and, we have investors. I've deployed a lot of my capital into this from, previous resources yeah. So
From your prior journey. Yep.
previous journey, yeah. So, and that's again, entrepreneurship, connecting the dots, energy that transmutes into something else, because money is energy, right? So now we see that there's this constant, like we're getting ready to commence around. So, which is actually interesting you asked that question, but I've been really focused on product market fit, and we have that.
Yeah, yeah.
Have
Clearly.
that. Our customers, there's repeat buying. There's repeat buying as a customer journey that repeats itself. Now we want to scale that, automate, scale that. And when I say automate, scale that, the entire process of it. Yes, here we had to build the foundation from the service team, the sales team, service team, the engineering team. We had to do that, a lot of that locally. We had some of the most brilliant engineers in the world here. You mentioned it earlier. I started my career here at Microsoft IT Academy, University of Lagos, which just did a masterclass at University of Lagos recently. So I've experienced a full circle, literally in the business of JéGO, and the full circle multiple times in life. But this one for me was one of those where it was like, at some point, it still is, where we want to be, where we will be, rather, is far ahead. The work is ahead, right?
Yeah.
Where
No,
we
but
are,
you're putting in, you've put in so much. Some of it, and this is just entrepreneurship, right? There's foresight, there's vision, there's ambition, and then there's just a lot of luck, right? And there's a lot of things that break your way and things that break against you, and then there's just a timing, market timing, historical timing, all those different things. Like you said, you can meet investors in the U.S., in the Bay Area, in California, arguably the most forward-thinking investors in the world. But when you meet them in 2021 and you're talking about this conceptually, that's a whole different thing than meeting them in 2025 when you're like, oh, but we have this product and these
right.
sizes and these, and they're commercial and we're selling these, and we're generating revenue. And yes, we also want to build out the infrastructure. We can build this and this and this and this. But then all of a sudden they're like, oh, hey, it's 2025. By the way, hey, Frederick, buddy, guess what? Yeah, our investment climate here in the U.S. is shit now because there's so much political risk and there's so much unsettledness. Hey, now we'd really love to talk about what's going on in Nigeria. So some of it is just luck and timing and circumstances, but you've laid these foundations that are piecing together this version of an energy company that will have mobility as well as energy generation, energy transmission. Like you're piecing together this in a way that most companies don't, because they just come at it from one product, and as you said, some people told you like, man, just do those energy pod things, forget about the rest of it, right? But you're like, if you can persist and if you can continually convince like this new round that you're opening, right, this next group of investors to come along with you at this level, I mean, you're giving yourselves a roadmap to a possibility. Doesn't mean it'll happen, right? But to a possibility that could be like this massively fully integrated vertical and horizontal energy company that could provide different products for different people's needs in the electrified future, that skips a couple of generations. And all of a sudden, as you said, now you've got young people who are now educated, they've graduated, they've got better jobs, better incomes, and they are able to consume more things differently in Lagos and in Ghana and in Kenya than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And then those people's first instinct when they buy their new house is, of course, my house is going to be electrified and it's going to have a power pod. And then when they buy their first car, they're like, yeah, I'm not buying I'm going to buy an electric car. Of course I am. Like, so you're like, but again, it's a good thing you're a young man, right? Because that's like a 50-year play that you're making.
Right.
Right.
It is a 50-year play. This isn't like a rush.
Yeah, this isn't like a 5-year, what's going to happen in 5 years, Frederick, story. This is you're making a 50-year play, and you're like 5 years into a 50-year play.
Yeah, so just 10%.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at eSudo. Running any business, but especially a law firm, means balancing a lot. And technology, frankly, shouldn't be a headache. eSudo makes information technology and cybersecurity simple for law firms large or small. With over 20 years of experience, they specialize in everything from Microsoft 365 management to advanced cybersecurity solutions. They help you to stay ahead of threats, manage your data securely, and keep your tech running smoothly so that you can focus on what matters most, your clients. eSudo understands the legal industry's unique needs, offering tailored solutions to ensure that your firm is always in compliance and always protected. Are you ready to upgrade your firm's technology or get help with your questions? Visit esudo.com.
I just want to add just that, we started with 3.6 kilowatts, and today we've deployed over 2 megawatts. Right, we have systems as large as 1.5 megawatts, for example. That was our largest project this year, and we've deployed an additional 500 kilowatts. So that's about 2 megawatt, roughly, that we've deployed, and in Nigeria alone, and just building more EV charging infrastructure, EV charging, and the way our approach is unique, and reducing pressure on the grid, creating a shared network, right? Because not everyone's going to be able to install EV chargers. So who's going to generate revenue? Just like Airbnb, right? Shared value really works here. And we provide large or stable energy systems, right? Sufficient energy reliability to our customers who also have fleets of EVs. So like you're saying earlier, the B2B to C play for us, crossing the chasm, is very strategic in entering this market from this angle, because in technology, the initial product pricing is always high because of the cost of development. Remember when flat screen TVs were like $10,000, $15,000? Now anybody has it. You can get some for, if under $100 if you looked around properly. So that is where one of the reasons, again, the data, what I saw was the economics, the unit economics in this space is going to get beautiful. I could throw my hat in the game. That was maybe 20 years ago I wouldn't have, because unit of economics didn't make sense then. But I saw a trend, especially during the pandemic. This was right before JéGO. So there was data I came across in the stock market and also from RFPs that showed that this is where this market is going to be. It's actually not going to be as expensive. So meaning I can provide lower cost transportation that competes with used vehicles in the African and Nigerian market. And also, same thing with energy, but also most importantly, where we are as a country, because that's the next step in our journey, is our factory, because of the logistics. So the logistics is one of our most expensive parts of our business, importing and having to, so we want to do the SKD, semi-knockdown. So, but what that does for us as a company, and even just as a nation, different factories that are, popping up here, is the middle point that we happen to be in, where we can sell to the United States, Brazil, Americas, to South Africa, East Africa, West Africa, to Europe. So we can really put our value into this ecosystem. And we have a lot of brilliant engineers here in Nigeria, not just JéGO, but in general. So again, when you see the opportunity, what investors are saying is they're starting to see it. The ecosystem here, but also the global economics, global politics, and where Nigeria sits. When you look at where America is and where Nigeria is, we're probably the largest nation right across America.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Literally geographically kind of comparable to one. Yeah.
Right.
No, and it's
and
funny.
It's English speaking as well. So the time zone is not bad if you're on the East Coast.
Right.
Same thing in California is not bad. I love working.
No, I mean, this is this is an effort by you to go late in your evening and early in my day, but 8 or 9 hours isn't terrible. Like that's doable.
Yeah. So we sell modular clean energy systems, which today is powered by solar, but they're hybrid, meaning so it's not just only solar. So if it's raining, your systems can be charged by the grid. So you have storage to use in event of power outage. Same thing with the cars. The electric vehicles are a step in the direction of the driverless journey. Right. Which is our North Star. So we need to generate revenue, the more traction. We sold a few. The goal is to sell, if we're going to leave any dent, we will sell millions. That's the goal because of the size of the market. And that's what we're focused on. So if we're going to sell millions, we need to make sure that the customers that we're selling to have electricity.
That's exactly.
It's just they have electricity, don't get me wrong, just don't have enough of it to go charge an electric vehicle. There are rich people that have sufficient, they have excess, but the rich people are not we sell to them, but they're not right. That's not our core target market. They're like outside that they still buy, but we're focused on.
You're not building only for them, right?
No, we're building for the 90% because that's why we're going to that B2B to C journey, because the enterprises, when they buy an energy system, when they buy fleets of EVs, their employees get to benefit from it. Their employees get to know about it. And we offer financing as well for our products. So their employees can apply for financing on that product. The enterprise can afford to pay whole price because they don't want to have debt. Or, we deal with large, so that's the thing. When we came into the market, we started with the C side, the individuals and some businesses, but then we quickly went into enterprise, powering hotels, things like that. Now, factories, and, we have investors on our cap table from federal, we have partners that make sure.
I was going to say the investors now become strategic partners, and that's the other part.
Strategic,
right. That's the other part of B2B. right?
Exactly.
B2B in the enterprise becomes your cap table gets filled with not only like wealthy individuals or venture capital firms from different markets, but also more so by these enterprise
Um,
organizations who see value in you solving a problem for them, and
correct.
they will not only pay you for it as a client, but they will also say, but I also want to take a stake in you. I want to ensure that you can succeed, because I
Correct.
want you to, I don't care, I don't almost sometimes selfishly care if you succeed at scale. I care
Right.
that you stay alive so you can help me solve my problem for the next 20 years. And if you
Yeah.
solve other problems for other factories and other manufacturers, that's cool. Like,
Right.
right. So it's kind of, it's the
That's been
enterprise
the journey.
investment.
That's
Yeah.
actually
That's not
we
surprising to hear. It's
we
awesome to hear.
yeah. Yeah,
I got a
it's
couple
beautiful.
questions before you and I could literally, this has been so enjoyable. Selfishly, I could talk to you all day, but I don't want to do that to you. So I've got a couple more questions before we finish and get to our last segment. And there are two in particular that I was really thinking about before we even got on this call together. And one is a businessy one, and then one is a bit more kind of personal, but about the macro community and economy of Nigeria. So let's talk about the business one first, which is, you mentioned early on in this conversation, you made a real passing reference to like EVs from China and like BYD, right? Like, and you mentioned it in one of your other answers. It's something I watch with a lot of interest, because about 20 years ago or so, I did a stretch of about 5 or 6 years where I was involved in a lot of business in mainland China and Southeast Asia back in the early 2000s. And so I spent an inordinate amount of time there, and I understand the cultures and the markets. And I saw what they were doing 22 years ago, right? And now it's commonplace, right? So talk to me about, you know, in Nigeria, so in the US perspective, right, I could say, oh, I'm a business junkie, and so I know that there are companies like BYD and China and all this, but there's such a hard wall between China and the US right now that like
Mhm.
lots of US people and lots of US businesses don't even really know about it, and they're not competing with each other anymore. They're basically just
Right.
saying, we're going to play in different spheres. But you live outside this bubble. Like, you
I
live
do.
and work and you're building in a world where China can come in and say like, hey, we want to sell our EVs into Nigeria and into the
Yeah.
African continent.
Yeah.
So give us a window into what China is doing, what role they're playing there in the market that you're
Right.
competing in.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons we're here as well is I saw the policies in America for importing China. Our EVs are manufactured in China, right? We were going to start in the US, price was way too high, and economics essentially. So we paid 30%, for example, to bring in our JéGO pod into the US at the time. And for a startup, 30% is steep. We're talking about a vehicle that's six-figure
Right.
value. And then you pay 30% on top of that. That's just, so in sense of scale, we just saw a little roadblocks there. Nigeria, on the other hand, or the African continent, have better relationships with China. So we, it's a price sensitive market. And China makes it possible to sell. Now, the difference is, back in the day, China had a reputation for quality, or product quality. Now it's different, where their products are actually quality, they're intelligent, and compete
Yep.
with products, not just compete. These are products that are actually resold or sold. They're manufactured in China, but they've always been sold in the US. They've always been sold in Europe, but they changed maybe one or two things here, and it's made in Italy and it's made in
Right.
America. So the customers today are a bit smarter. They have options. They are intelligent. They know what they want. You can't run an ad and sell your stuff to them. So with us, we benefit from that in supply chain, logistics, product development, and then
Right.
skill transfer, where we're able to introduce new skills to our team. And there's a lot of the relationship between the Nigerian market and the Chinese market has been growing from what I've been observing. The energy business is influenced by China. China is big on renewable energy. So when basically what we've seen is, whatever China is doing, because of the size of the market over there and the relationship, drives adoption in Nigeria
Okay.
because
That's
of the
awesome.
policies. What they really flog, or I don't use the word flog, but they really like put pressure on the government in ways people like, in different ways. I wouldn't share, but
Yeah.
not that I know of entirely, but I know
Hey,
some
they use economic leverage the
economic.
way that the way that the U.S. after World War II used economic and military leverage the same, right? I mean, so I am very much a Sinophile. Like I am a China believer because again of my exposure. Ironically,
Right,
when I was and ironically, when I was exposed to it, the U.S. was also open to that and was also
right,
engaged in relationships with them.
yeah,
So it was a very different world than we live in today. But
it was bad.
I'm not just because we've put up political walls at this moment in history. I'm not going to like ignore all of what I experienced and what I understand to be true. Right.
Yeah,
So I have a wider view than many do about this. I don't view it as like a net competitive. What I'm fascinated by is your point of view that because I love this as an entrepreneur, right? Is having China in your market essentially is, yes, competitive at some level, sure. But really more importantly, it's that they're validating your market, right? So it's the old adage of, I often ask new entrepreneurs, right? Like, who are your competitors? And the danger is when someone says, oh no, we don't have any
they're no
competitors.
competitors.
Like
I
that,
think
like, oh, that's not good. Cause then there's not really a
there's no
market,
market.
right?
There's no
Yeah,
market.
but if China sees the opportunity in Nigeria, that Frederick sees the opportunity in Nigeria, that's a good thing for JéGO long term. Like
BYD's in Nigeria.
yeah, of course, yeah.
BYD is
Like
actually in Nigeria.
BYDs are great cars. I mean,
Yeah.
like
So
what?
like I
Right?
meant the actual company. So
They have
they have an
present.
office in Lagos.
Okay, okay.
So Lagos has, they say Lagos is like the Dubai of Africa. So like there's a lot of, also not just Dubai, but the Silicon Valley. There's a lot of there's a couple or a few multi-billion-dollar startups here. So we're talking about, there's a surge in growth in the entertainment industry, surge,
Everything.
which includes tech because they're using tech to distribute across the world. I had a previous, I have a previous venture that benefited from that, right? Where you basically took what was here and exported. So I basically, in the last decade plus, I've been in the business of exporting value, energy, no pun intended.
No, literally,
Uh,
yeah.
so the intention is to do that with JéGO again, where we take local engineering talent, what we do with the Chinese mix of technology with that, potentially, our engineers in the US who are brilliant engineers, we combine that. It's all learning, right? It's just like you said, you lived in China and different parts of the world, Korea, America. So that shapes how you build things. That shapes how you do things, right? Like I
100%
know
true.
a few words in Chinese, those things.
So I'm curious, you've referenced it a bunch of times, maybe just a quick story, like the great story of you're studying at the Microsoft Technology Institute and you're a young guy, you're learning how to code. And now you come full circle back and you're teaching master classes and your company is offering that kind of innovation education to the young people. Like, you mentioned a couple of big, huge companies. Is there a growing community of like young innovators? And are there millions of young student engineers like Frederick throughout the universities across Nigeria?
One, there have always been people even more intelligent than I am. The problem is the access to the platform to demonstrate. Now, in the current technology world, economy that Nigeria is in, the technology part is a big generator for nation's revenue. So it's a big part of the nation's revenue, right? And
Yeah,
same thing with the entertainment sector, but primarily all that is driven by technology.
sure.
It's the fundamental part. I believe they even they said last year, or was it this year, that the entertainment industry generated more than the oil industry. That is
Which
what we're
again,
dealing
like
with in
that's a
Nigeria.
huge move forward. Yeah.
That's a
And so
huge
and
forward.
so we've got literally like young demographics, young country, as you
Correct.
said to us in the very beginning. And I'm educated country, right? And so what you're telling me is that there are literally millions of young
Oh,
engineers
millions.
throughout the school systems who then as they come into their careers, more and more of them are going to go to work for these technology companies that are the
Oh,
new ones, the big
yeah.
ones.
Yeah. There's a whole, it's very, and one of the reasons, I mean, like, it's very inspiring. Since I've been here in my journey, I was in America for 13 years, so I had to adjust. But like, they're not even just adjust, but the inspiration around just the amount of determination, the amount of resilience, the amount of creativity.
I love that.
You're always going to be inspired by another company, how they're doing. Like, entrepreneurship is like oxygen here. Even if
That's
you're
amazing.
working for someone, so there was a time where you could have one job. So this is how you know the economy is growing. You could have one job, but now people have 3 jobs, right? In a way, you could say maybe that's not a sign of economic growth, but what I see is the energy demand collectively, not just in the sense of literal energy, but
Right.
the economy requires more resources. Individuals require more resources. So there's a demand for more income. There's one thing to have demand for income, but having the channels to generate income, if it's absent, that's where things like what's happening in Oakland, and parts of Nigeria happen. But in Nigeria's cases, back then, there was the wealthy class and then the class that not, right? And then you have today you have that gap is filled up. There's a middle class that's actually present.
All right. So, and there's a whole other podcast we could do about comparing African development to Latin American development that I've watched and participated in the last 10 years. A lot of direct parallels between the two. So, but we're not going to do that podcast today. We're going to finish up this one. So, last question for you. This is our closing question. So, maybe just a bullet point answer, maybe like 1 or 2 tips, right? And then we'll get you out of here. But so for someone, for a young entrepreneur, young aspiring entrepreneur, young student engineer in Nigeria, who themselves still has kind of limited resources, but they've got big, huge ideas, what would be just two principles that you have leaned into in your career journey, in your story, right? That you would give that advice to anybody. So you meet a young entrepreneur engineer tomorrow at a university in Lagos, and he or she's probably like, hey, like, what are the 2 things I really got to do early in my career so that I can try and be like you someday? Like, what are those 2 things you would advise them?
Well, 1, 2, I always tell them they'll be better, much more successful, right? 2, whenever you have an idea or vision or dream, always write it down. So
there we go.
I have one in front of me. I have another one. That's 2 whiteboards. There's another one out there, and I have a bunch of notepads, small ones.
Yeah, everywhere.
It's written. They said, write it down and make it plain. All right, it's in the Bible. So
good for you.
Manifestation. Your brain. That's the first part. You always have to write it down. So whatever you want to bring to life, you have to write it down. Now, limited resources. Because again, a lot of people have ideas, but they never write it down. So it never comes to life. So you can't really execute without thinking it out, right? Fleshing it out. And the third part is, if you have limited resources, which I believe I have infinite opportunities, resources can be finite, but it's what you do with your existing resources that matter, right? It's never about your next resource, because it's like the eternal present where we are today. You might look at that as limited, or you can look at it as infinite. In the current moment, there's infinite opportunities and infinite directions you can go. So using your existing resources, like for us, when we're still going through that. It's continuous. And even when you're a $500 million company, $1 billion company, you still have to manage your resources. You still have to work with those resources. You're never going to there's a company that's just did $1 billion in revenue. And there's a company that's losing $1 billion in revenue. You're always, this universe and the world we exist in, there's always going to be something bigger, higher, better, and shinier. So your magic, like we have, how have we gone from the JéGO pod to, energy systems, but there's a story there. It's using what we have in front of us to solve pain points for our customers. We went from, like I mentioned earlier, the 3.6 kilowatt to over 1 megawatt of solutions, which was being present, listening to the customers, right? First megawatt project that we got that with, with the existing current resource that we had, with the traction we had. And we showed up. We said yes when others might have said no, or when the challenge seemed greater than us in the sense of opportunities, we embraced it. We learned as a team, we grew, and that's how you grow. But you stay comfortable in what you know, which is the past, and you're not in the present to learn the present, then you can't really create tomorrow. Tomorrow is created
Love that.
today. So
Love that.
it's focus on where you are. Never compare your journey to anybody, and you can achieve anything that you want to achieve. It's just, you can, whatever the wildest dream you have, it's there because you can achieve it. You just have to
And
persist.
there is the mic drop quote of this podcast episode right there at the end. You took us from, I'm eternally grateful to you. You took us from like the personal tragedy, which could have derailed you and like it would so many people in so many different ways. And your mechanism, just your emotional and intellectual mechanism to honor your friend's loss was that you saw the pieces of that catalytic event and you pulled those pieces apart and you said, if this doesn't happen, if this isn't in place, if this was better, if that wasn't broken, if this wasn't the way that it was accepted, like maybe we could minimize that so that doesn't happen to someone else's cousin, best friend in the future. And I'm going to come home I'm going to remigrate to my homeland to try to change that. And that is classic entrepreneurship. And then you took us all the way through right here to now. You take us right to the punchline of this whole conversation, which is so beautiful and so specific and so data-driven and so entrepreneurial, because the punchline is like the great punchline to every great entrepreneurial story, which is like, you took all of that and then you just you built something that solved the problem for someone, and then you built upon that, and then you made that a little bit better, and then you offered it to someone else, and then you built upon that. And at each point, you always had limitations. You always had obstacles. You always had a lack of resources, because you also always had, like this, as I called it earlier, this 50-year vision, right? That is,
the resources are never enough.
Right, never have done. I mean, you would like never. Year 49 of a 50-year vision, you need more to get to year 50, right? So like the way you've tied this all together, it's exactly what I was hopeful for. I didn't know how this conversation was going to go, other than I knew it would be good and enjoyable. But you've given us so many lessons. You've taught us so many things about Nigeria. Thank you for that. You've taught us all so many things about the opportunities in Nigeria and in the African continent. And you have told the story about JéGO, which frankly, I was a fan of for years quietly online. And now I'm a huge advocate for, because JéGO needs to not only expand its footprint and its impact in Nigeria, but everywhere else that you decide to go. And I will be happy for our podcast to be a little part of that journey. So let me just thank you again. And then real quick before we close, how do people find you or follow you online? How do people find or follow the company? Give us a couple of quick social details and or website addresses, et cetera.
So for JéGO, they can find JéGO, JEGO Technologies with, plural. And you can find us on Instagram with that. You can also find us on LinkedIn with that. There's a space between the JéGO and the technologies. You can find me, my full name. Maybe you can type that out. Frederick Akpoghene. There's an E after the D. And then on Instagram, above Av Mind, ABOVAV_mind. Hope your team can put that down.
No, we'll put all those put all those addresses in the show notes. My young friend from Nigeria, this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm so grateful.
Thank you,
we had some technical problems that people will never know about today, but
no worry.
I'm grateful for your patience. Thank you so much. This is a blast.
Thank you very much, Rob.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. We can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.